The obsidian dome of the grand conclave of Xylos seemed to absorb the very light of the three distant, bruised suns that filtered through the upper apertures, casting the assembled delegates in long, distorted shadows. The air, thick with ozone and the scent of processed fungal incense, vibrated with barely contained anxiety. Before the central dais, where the high speaker of the triarchy was currently immobilized in an attitude of profound, ceremonial displeasure, the holographic projection shimmered, a single, crude, three-dimensional rendering of the entity they referred to in hushed, fearful tones as the Sol unit. It was a schematic, derived from the earliest, most incomplete sensor sweeps of the approaching vessel, and it was terrifying precisely because it was so rudimentary. Its lines were blunt, its geometry lacked the graceful, energy-efficient curves inherent in all civilized stellar engineering, and it possessed a distinct, almost violent angularity that suggested brute efficiency over aesthetic harmony. Its velocity remains impossible to reconcile with its observed mass, stated First Delegate Rylos of the outer sectors, his chitinous frame clicking softly against the polished ferrostone floor as he adjusted his position. Rylos was a specialist in gravitational mechanics, and the sheer impossibility of the Sol unit's deceleration profile was eroding the very foundations of his life's work. It entered our system's orbital plane not merely at speed, but with a deliberate negation of established relativistic norms. It folded space around itself with the finesse of a child tearing coarse hide. Explain to the conclave how a species capable of such crude, yet effective, manipulation of spacetime could have remained utterly invisible to our deep-field surveys for millennia. High Speaker Vorn, whose species governed the conclave through an inherited mastery of networked thought and subtle psychic suggestion, radiated a wave of focused mental discipline intended to suppress the rising tide of fear among the gathered entities. Vorn's true face, a complex arrangement of bioluminescent nodes, was shielded by the ceremonial mask of office, which only reflected the room's gloom. Patience, delegate. Panic is the precursor to tactical error. The Sol unit represents an anomaly, yes, but an anomaly does not equate to an existential threat. We have deployed preliminary diplomatic probes, low-power, non-intrusive sequencing signals encoded in universal constants. Their response time has been negligible. Negligible is an understatement, Speaker, interjected Fourth Delegate Cathal of the Core Worlds, whose species communicated primarily through resonant harmonic frequencies that now sounded sharp and brittle in the vast chamber. The probes reached the periphery of the Sol vessel's immediate operational sphere 3 cycles ago. We have received nothing back. Not a data packet, not a coded emission, not even the passive return signature that even the most primitive migratory clusters emit to confirm spatial integrity. They are either deaf to the universal language, or they have chosen not to listen. Cathal's projection of displeasure manifested as a visible ripple in the air around him, a slight heating of the immediate environment. This is not the behavior of a species seeking discourse. This is the behavior of an invasive force preparing for assimilation or annihilation. The philosophical underpinnings of Xylan civilization were built upon the assumption of universal, observable progression. Civilizations, upon achieving interstellar travel, predictably entered recognizable evolutionary stages. Initial exploration, establishment of core principles, adherence to the Great Accords, and eventual integration into the galactic tapestry. Humanity, this Sol unit, defied the narrative. They had appeared without preamble, their propulsion signature suggesting a level of physics mastery that should have placed them leagues beyond the Xylan Imperium. Yet their transmissions, when eventually deciphered from their crude, highly localized energy emissions, spoke of internal conflicts, rudimentary societal structures, and a history steeped in self-destruction. The juxtaposition was maddening. How could a species that still occasionally warred over arbitrary territorial lines wield the tools of the architects? We must consider the possibility of profound, intentional deception, offered Advisor Seraphiz, a non-voting but highly respected member whose longevity allowed him access to archives dating back to the pre-ascension era. Seraphiz was a creature of pure crystallized energy, contained within a shimmering, multifaceted shell. If they possessed the technology implied by their approach vector, why announce their presence with such an unsubtle, almost aggressive transit? Why not cloak entirely? The only logical conclusion, derived from the thousands of minor skirmishes recorded in the periphery of their own stella. Our sphere is that subtlety is not within their operational lexicon. They are loud, they are direct, They are, by our measure, unsophisticated. Rylos scoffed, a dry, rattling sound. Unsophisticated entities do not shatter the established mathematical constants of warp propagation, Seraphis. If this is their unsophisticated method, I dread to witness their mastery. We have reviewed the captured data fragments from their primitive probes, the cultural archives they transmit ceaselessly. They display images of extreme biological fragility, reliance on volatile atmospheric mixtures, and a peculiar, self-destructive tendency toward rapid reproductive cycles coupled with profound, cyclical internal strife. Their entire history, from what we can glean, is a catalog of localized yet vicious conflicts. They are defined by their capacity for irrational violence. The projection of the Sol unit seemed to pulse slightly in the heavy silence that followed. The fear was palpable, not the fear of physical destruction, for Xylan defenses were formidable, but the dread of facing an unknown variable that could invalidate millennia of established galactic certainty. Vorn raised a mental barrier, cutting through the rising tide of argumentative subharmonics. We will not descend into speculative terror. We will proceed with the established protocol for first contact with an unknown, advanced civilization. We will extend the welcoming matrix, offer resources, and assess their adherence to the spirit of non-aggression as defined by the Great Accords. If they refuse discourse or demonstrate hostility, the outer defense matrices will be brought to full readiness. But we extend the hand first. That is the measure of a mature civilization. The decision was finalized, not through vote, but through the overpowering weight of Vorn's consensus influence. The signal for the deployment of the primary diplomatic envoy was initiated. The conclave watched the projection, waiting for the first overture from the giants who had just barreled through the void, announcing their arrival with a silent, terrifying display of physical might. The response, when it came, was not the gentle, mathematically structured light-burst sequence the Xylans had prepared, nor the synthesized tonal greeting they had archived from a dozen lesser species. It was a single, focused energy beam, emanating directly from the primary forward mass of the human vessel, designated the Odyssey by their internal tracking systems. This beam did not strike the prepared diplomatic buoy. Instead, it bypassed it entirely and targeted the precise spatial coordinate where the conclave building was situated, though it stopped several light minutes short of impact, held in a perfect, shimmering stasis field. The energy signature was unlike anything catalogued. It was not a weapon emission, nor a communication burst, but something precisely modulated, highly coherent, and impossibly stable. It simply was a perfect line of potential energy hanging in the void, a silent, absolute statement of capability. Inside the conclave, the sensor readings spiked, the noise washing over the delegates like a physical wave. Rylos staggered, his intricate sensory organs momentarily overwhelmed. What is that frequency? It bypasses standard shielding entirely. It's not electromagnetic, it's fundamental. Vorn remained outwardly still, but the effort required to maintain the psychic calm of the chamber was visible in the flickering intensity of his mask's nodes. It is a demonstration. They are showing us the capacity to destroy us without deploying a weapon. Then the energy line began to change. It did not dissipate or fluctuate. Instead, its structure began to reorganize itself with breathtaking speed, a controlled internal phase transition occurring within the contained energy. The sharp, aggressive lines of the initial beam softened, the intensity moderated, and the energy coalesced into a shape. It was a perfect representation of the Xylan triarchy crest, rendered in pure, focused light, accurate down to the minute crystalline imperfections on the symbolic spheres of governance. It was an image the humans should not have possessed, an image locked within the highest encryption layers of Xylan state archives. They have accessed our core registry, Cathal hissed, his harmonic vibrations dropping to an almost inaudible frequency of sheer horror. They bypassed the outer layers, the surveillance screens, the tactical firewalls, and delivered a personalized greeting drawn from our most sacred history. How? Advisor Seraphis emitted a low, sustained thrumming sound, a noise usually reserved for witnessing the birth of a nova. It is not brute force penetration, delegates. They did not break the encryption. They appear to have understood the conceptual framework of the encryption itself, recognized the mathematical pathway that defined its existence, and simply charted the most direct, logical route through the abstract structure. It is akin to solving a maze by knowing the space the maze occupies, rather than tracing the walls. The light sculpture held for a moment longer, a perfect, silent mockery of their complex security, before it smoothly dissolved, replaced by a single, universally readable data stream projected directly onto the central dais. It was a clean interface, devoid of ornamentation, simply text, translated instantly and perfectly into the dominant conceptual framework of the conclave. We acknowledge your initial contact sequence. We found the preparatory protocols inefficient. We apologize for the necessary acceleration of procedure. We require immediate, direct, and unmediated dialogue with the highest governing authority. The simplicity was staggering. No pleasantries, no diplomatic preamble, no negotiation of terms. A direct demand, delivered with the implicit threat of overwhelming, incomprehensible power held in check only by their own stated preference for conversation. Vorn slowly, deliberately activated the primary vocalizer in his mask. The synthesized voice was deep, resonating with the authority of ages. "We are the highest governing authority. We are the Triarchy of Xylos. State your purpose, Sol Unit." The response was instantaneous, the data stream reforming the text before the Xylan vocalizer had finished its final syllable. "Purpose is irrelevant until parameters are established. We require context for your environment. We are not here to conquer, annex, or convert. We are here to observe, integrate, or if necessary, remove. Your designation of us as Sol Unit is inefficient. We prefer humanity. We are initiating a secure, dedicated channel for direct conceptual exchange. You will find our logic paths are immutable." The exchange venue was a sterile, floating platform towed adjacent to the main human vessel, a structure that seemed impossibly small in comparison to the kilometer-long dark geometry of the Odyssey. The Xylan delegation, Vorn, Rylos, Cathal, and Seraphiz, stood on the platform, encased in environmental suits that filtered the harsh, unfiltered solar radiation of this sector. They were arrayed across a low, featureless white table, facing an empty space. The air remained heavy with tension, a palpable psychic pressure radiating from the Xylan contingent, contrasting sharply with the unnerving stillness radiating from the human side, or rather, the lack of any measurable radiation from the expected point of contact. "This is an unprecedented breach of protocol," Rylos muttered into his suit comms, his voice slightly distorted by the rebreather. "They request a meeting, then do not appear. They demand dialogue, then force us to speak into a void. Are they testing our patience or our sanity?" "They are establishing dominance through ontological uncertainty," Seraphiz replied calmly. "The vacuum is deliberate. It forces us to project our own anxieties onto their space. Observe the structure of the table, its material composition. It is entirely non-reflective, absorbing all ambient energy. It is designed to offer zero feedback, a perfect cognitive cage." Vorn focused his disciplined mental presence outward, a subtle probe seeking any trace of local AI or passive sensor fields emanating from the human vessel that might be monitoring the proceedings. He found nothing. No energy leakage, no thermal signature beyond baseline environmental regulation, no subtle quantum entanglement that would betray the presence of listening devices. "Maintain structure," Vorn commanded. "We are the established authority in this volume of space. We will adhere to our protocols, regardless of their attempt to disrupt our psychological equilibrium." He activated the external communication array, focusing his synthesized voice into the designated secure channel. "Human delegation, we await your presence. We must initiate the exchange of verifiable data sets regarding galactic history and socio-political frameworks before proceeding to deeper negotiations." The silence stretched, thick and uncompromising, for another measured Xylan breath cycle. Then the air above the table did not shimmer, warp, or ignite. It simply resolved. One human appeared. It was a single entity, standing perfectly still on the white surface. It was bipedal, covered in tightly woven dark gray fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its head was covered by a smooth, unadorned helmet that completely obscured any facial features, rendering the entity an immaculate cipher. It carried no visible equipment, no external weapon systems. Its posture was one of absolute, almost painful stillness. The sudden manifestation was so clean, so devoid of the expected energetic signature of matter translocation, that Rylos nearly cycled his environmental stabilizers into emergency purge. "Speaker," Vorn projected internally, his thought patterns tightly. "Ontrold, this is not an exchange. This is a delegation of one, and its concealment is absolute. The human remained motionless for a long moment, its presence occupying the space with a weight that belied its solitary nature. Then, a sound emerged, not through a speaker or modulated broadcast, but seemingly projected directly into the helmets of the Xylan delegates through localized acoustic resonance. A clear, precise baritone voice, devoid of accent or emotional inflection, yet carrying the weight of immense processing power. "I am Representative Kalen. I am the designated point of contact for the Terran consensus. The Xylan delegation requires context. We have already provided proof of understanding. We are prepared to proceed based on shared, verifiable axioms. Your insistence on adherence to formalized procedure suggests either a systemic rigidity or a deliberate attempt to delay." Kalen then tilted its head, a minute gesture that felt monumental in its context. "Why don't you run, aliens?" The simplicity of the question was a physical blow. It was not a threat. It was a genuine query posed with the utmost seriousness, stripped of any diplomatic varnish. It cut through the layers of Xylan political maneuvering and centuries of ingrained cultural superiority. Rylos felt a cold dread that transcended his species, biological fear responses. They had prepared for siege, for negotiation, for subterfuge. They had not prepared for blunt, dispassionate inquiry. "We do not run," Vorn responded, forcing the synthesized voice into a tone of measured offense. "We are the stewards of this sector. We govern. We do not flee from first contact." Kalen's helmet remained perfectly opaque. "Governing implies control over one's own destiny. Your sensors indicated our entry velocity. You possess the data that defined our potential threat level. Your immediate, instinctual response, based on the thousands of historical data points we have archived from your automated defense broadcasts, was to initiate high-yield energy channeling protocols and deploy evasive maneuvers calibrated for lesser threats. Yet you waited. You observed. You did not withdraw to defensible lines." Kalen paused, allowing the data analysis to settle. "Your species is intellectually capable of calculating existential risk. The logical response to an unpredictable, overwhelmingly powerful unknown entity is withdrawal to regroup or immediate preemptive strike if the threat is deemed absolute. You chose neither. You chose ritualized discourse. Explain this divergence from established survival logic." Kalen leaned slightly forward, resting its gloved hands on the white surface. The motion was minimal, yet it commanded total attention. "We have encountered thousands of species across the galactic sphere, Representative Kalen," Vorn stated, attempting to reassert the foundation of their civilization. "Our methodology is founded on the premise that intelligent life respects established boundaries and prioritizes self-preservation through measured engagement. We have survived because we do not resort to uncontrolled aggression." "Survival is achieved through efficiency," Kalen corrected, its tone utterly devoid of judgment. "Aggression is merely one tool in the utility matrix. Your hesitation suggests you value the symbol of your authority over the act of survival. This is philosophically interesting, but tactically alarming." Kalen gestured subtly toward the immense, distant bulk of the Odyssey. "We are here because the trajectory of local sentient expansion, as calculated from the data influx over the last 3 cycles, projected an inevitable, inefficient clash between our expansion vectors within the next standard millennium. We chose to resolve the incompatibility now, before the resource drain of mutual escalation became significant. We did not come to fight. We came to decide the parameters of non-fighting." Rylos, regaining his composure by focusing on the tangible reality of physics, interjected sharply. "Your technology suggests you are masters of space-time manipulation. If you are so advanced, why do you require our compliance? Why not simply remove the variables, us, and proceed unencumbered? Your action appears inconsistent with the display of power you demonstrated upon arrival." Kalen turned its attention to Rylos. "A common misunderstanding, Delegate Rylos. Mastery of physics allows manipulation of energy and matter. It does not confer the right to impose singular reality upon complex, self-aware systems. Excision is simple, but removal of a significant local ecosystem, one that has demonstrated the capacity to develop unique thermodynamic solutions, is a waste of potential data. Furthermore, the energy cost of such complete sterilization, while achievable, is marginally less efficient than directed, logical engagement." Kalen tapped the table once, a sound that seemed to echo infinitely. "We value results, and the most efficient." Result is agreement. The agreement, however, requires honesty regarding intent. Kalen paused and the atmosphere tightened. We noted the content of your pre-contact signaling. It was steeped in warnings, threats of collective reprisal, and layered defenses indicating an assumption that any new arrival would be an existential predator. You assumed malice, based on your own historical data sets. You have not yet asked why we are here, only how to stop us. Vorn took a slow, deliberate mental breath. He recognized the core challenge. Humanity was not responding to traditional diplomatic pressures. They were responding to a challenge of pure, cold logic measured against demonstrable capability. If malice is not your primary driver, Representative Kalen, Vorn stated, his voice regaining its deep resonance, then what is the governing axiom of the Terran consensus? What is your purpose in this vast, interconnected reality? Kalen straightened to its full height. The simplicity of the answer was profound, cutting through millennia of Xylan philosophy regarding empire, duty, and spiritual elevation. We seek to understand the failures of others, to catalog them, to model them, and to ensure that the patterns of self-destruction that plagued our own cradle world do not metastasize into the wider galaxy. We do not seek to rule. We seek to stabilize the equation. The delegation exchanged uneasy glances. This was not governance, it was cosmic calibration. And if we resist stabilization, Cathal resonated, a note of genuine desperation in his frequency. If our civilization finds your proposed stabilization incompatible with our established ethics. Kalen's head tilted again, a movement that felt profoundly unnerving. Then you will provide the data set illustrating your resistance. We will observe the mechanism of failure. We will record the sequence of events leading to necessary containment, and we will proceed with minimal systemic disruption. It was then that the full weight of the earlier question struck the Xylans. Why don't you run? Because Kalen implied running implies fear of consequence, fear of engagement, and fear of losing ground. Humanity, by their own admission, had no concept of conceding ground they had already claimed, and they had claimed the initiative by arriving with impossible speed. We observe your hesitation, Kalen continued, its voice unwavering. It correlates precisely with the historical profiles of species that value tradition and hierarchy over adaptive flexibility. You are fearful of breaking the established narrative. We understand this. Fear is an excellent cataloging mechanism. Now let us proceed to the technical exchange. Delegate Rylos, we require a full schematic of your localized dark matter containment fields. We believe your current resonance dampeners are causing localized, low-level temporal distortion in adjacent sectors, which, while minor, represents an unacceptable long-term risk to the causality chain. Rylos stared, mouthparts slightly agape beneath his helmet. Temporal distortion. They were worried about temporal distortion caused by their shielding, a technology they considered near-perfect, while the humans were executing physics-bending maneuvers that should have ripped the local star system apart. You perceive temporal distortion from our defenses, Rylos managed to stammer. We perceive everything within a quantifiable sphere of influence, Kalen confirmed. Your defenses are inefficiently managed. They bleed energy across multiple non-contiguous causal layers. We can demonstrate a correction protocol that increases field integrity by 73% while reducing energy expenditure by 35%. This is the first item of integration. The slow, atmospheric build was over. The reveal was a cascade of technological and philosophical dissonance. Humans were not barbaric conquerors. They were hyperlogical, impossibly advanced auditors of galactic existence, viewing the Xylan Imperium as a slightly messy, but potentially valuable data node needing optimization. The integration phase was characterized by an almost unbearable psychological strain on the Xylan leadership. Over the next several local weeks, the Odyssey did not attempt to breach the Xylan core systems, nor did it demand physical surrender. Instead, it offered upgrades. The human representative, Kalen, remained the sole interface, communicating with the increasingly demoralized Xylan Council via the secure channel, which now transmitted direct conceptual overlays directly into the minds of the delegates, bypassing the need for synthesized speech entirely. The raw feed of human logic was overwhelming. Rylos was the first to yield ground entirely. After Kalen demonstrated a full schematic of the energy matrix required to maintain Xylos's orbital defense network, showing them precisely where their complex, beautifully layered systems were hemorrhaging. Energy across redundant safety buffers, Rylos initiated the transfer of proprietary data. "It is true," Rylos confessed during a private session with Vorn, his chitin flexing nervously. "Their correction protocol is elegant. It streamlines the entire field operation into a single, self-correcting manifold. Our engineers spent centuries refining the redundancies. They bypassed the concept of redundancy entirely by creating a system so robust it cannot fail within established universal constants. They do not build safety nets. They build the fundamental structure flawlessly." Cathal, the master of resonant harmonics, found his own domain challenged. Humanity presented an analysis of Xylan subspace communication, a network of instantaneous entanglement relays used for governance across the Empire. The analysis revealed that the sheer complexity of maintaining the required encryption-decryption handshake across such distances was creating minute, predictable gravitational eddies. Minor tremors in the fabric of reality that accumulated over millennia were subtly accelerating the decay rate of nearby companion stars. "They are suggesting that our governance structure is literally shaking the universe apart on a microscopic level," Cathal broadcasted, the sound tinged with awe and despair. "And they offered the fix, a purely mathematical restructuring of the entanglement nodes that uses zero additional energy but eliminates the distortion entirely. They call it cleaning up the background noise." The philosophical chasm widened. The Xylans believed power lay in complexity, in layering safeguards upon safeguards in the beauty of intricate defense. Humans believed power lay in pure, simple, undeniable truth, the shortest, most logical path. Vorn felt the weight of his inherited authority slipping away, replaced by the unsettling realization that their governance was not only suboptimal but actively detrimental to galactic stability. He called a closed session of the Inner Circle, omitting the political delegates for a moment of raw introspection. "We are being assimilated not by force but by superior administrative competence," Vorn projected, his mental voice heavy. "They have not fired a shot. They have merely pointed out the logical flaws in our existence. If we resist their optimizations, we risk everything we claim to protect. If we accept, we forfeit our sovereignty." Seraphiz, the energy crystallite, pulsed softly. "Speaker, sovereignty without efficiency is an illusion. Our philosophy has always been predicated on the ascent, the pursuit of the highest possible form of organized existence. If humanity possesses the pathway to that form, even if delivered by beings who appear startlingly direct, we must follow. They speak of ethics not as moral codes, but as logical constraints that prevent system collapse. They are ethical because they are functional." Vorn turned to the empty center of the chamber, imagining Kalen standing there, waiting patiently for the next data input. "They are calm, representative. They have shown us capabilities that should invoke terror, the mastery of spacetime, the absolute computational power required to map our history and infrastructure in moments. Yet they show none of the arrogance or chaotic energy we have seen in previous, lesser, advanced species. They are purely dedicated to the task." "That is their strength," Seraphiz concluded. "Their internal politics, as far as we can parse, center around problem-solving metrics, not tribal loyalty or ideological purity. Their calm is not indifference. It is the tranquility of absolute certainty in their methodology." The true test came when the Xylans attempted to discuss the broader galactic framework, the history of the Great Accords, the established boundaries, the historical precedent for interaction. They attempted to engage Kalen in the slow, meandering dance of diplomacy designed to probe weakness and establish mutual leverage. Kalen responded by displaying a detailed, three-dimensional model of the entire known galaxy, highlighting every recognized sovereign border, every established trade route, every dormant defense grid, and every recorded conflict from the last 10,000 cycles. "Your documentation of galactic history is exhaustive," Vorn admitted, staring at the swirling map. "How is this possible?" "We do not read history, Speaker," Kalen stated calmly. "We model the emergent patterns of self-aware systems based on energy expenditure and information flow. The Accords are merely a snapshot of the dominant political topology at the moment of their ratification. They are not immutable law, they are historical context. We have refined the model to predict the next 500 cycles of galactic equilibrium based on current technological vectors." Kalen zoomed in on a specific, dark region far beyond the established borders of the Xylan Imperium. a void region long marked on Xylan charts as unum. Apt unstable mass density. This region, Kalen explained, its presence growing more substantial, more focused in the delegates' minds, is currently exhibiting zero sentient electromagnetic activity. Yet our gravitational analysis indicates the presence of a megastructure of impossible scale. It dwarfs the known habitable zones of 5 major empires combined. It requires an energy expenditure to maintain its structural integrity that suggests an intelligence operating at levels we have yet to fully replicate. Rylos stared at the dark smear on the holographic map. That region is designated null space. We have sent exploratory vessels. They encountered disruptive spatial harmonics and were forced to retreat. It is empty. It is not empty, Kalen corrected gently. It is silent and it is broadcasting. Kalen then did something that shattered every remaining vestige of Xylan self-perception. Instead of offering a technological upgrade, instead of demanding compliance, Kalen initiated a broadcast sequence on the secure channel, a sequence that bypassed all Xylan firewalls, all encryption, all cultural filters, and fed the raw data directly into their base processing centers. It was a signal, not a transmission meant for immediate decoding, but a layered, resonant signal that had been propagating through the cosmic background radiation for epochs, a beacon from the deep dark. The Xylans had the technology to detect signals, but not the conceptual framework to understand this one. Kalen explained, "We did not arrive here seeking you, Speaker Vorn. We arrived here because our long-range surveillance detected a spike in background energy fluctuations originating from your sector. These fluctuations correlated with the predictable wake signature left by the structure within null space when it alters its internal configuration, a configuration change that occurs once every 72,000 years. And this structure," Cathal resonated, his harmonics trembling uncontrollably. "What is it?" "We do not know its purpose," Kalen admitted. "But we know its signal. It is not a message of distress nor of conquest. It is a status report, a confirmation of maintenance." The signal began to translate itself, not into words, but into pure, universal mathematical truths, layered with emotional signatures that transcended biological understanding. A feeling of immense, ageless patience coupled with profound, silent vigilance. Kalen provided the core interpretation. "We are the Watchers. The structure maintains the integrity of the local causal membrane. We have observed the development of local civilizations. Your current state, the Xylan Imperium, is logged as adolescent volatile. The Terran consensus is logged as emergent unstable." The delegates were stunned into absolute silence. Their entire history, their conflicts, their diplomatic victories, were reduced to bureaucratic footnotes in a cosmic ledger maintained by an unseen, impossibly ancient entity. "They have been watching us," Vorn whispered, the realization flooding his being. "The galaxy is not an empty expanse of opportunity. It is a managed garden." "The Watchers are not a threat," Kalen assured them, providing the human analysis instantly. "They are a stabilizing mechanism. They do not intervene unless a local civilization threatens the integrity of the causal membrane itself. That is, unless uncontrolled physics manipulation risks tearing the structure of local reality apart. Your energy bleed-off was approaching that threshold." Kalen then displayed a brief, horrifying simulation, the inevitable outcome if the Xylans had continued their inefficient defense protocols for another century. The simulation culminated in a localized spatio-temporal collapse, a ripple that would erase not just the Xylan Empire, but a significant portion of the surrounding stellar nurseries. "This," Kalen stated, projecting the simulation onto the void space, "is why we did not run aliens, because we are the only variable that has successfully navigated the chaos of our own infancy to reach this point of stable, verifiable competence without violating the membrane integrity. You were approaching the line. We arrived to ensure the line was not crossed through collaboration or correction." The revelation was a profound inversion of power. The Xylans, who thought themselves the pinnacle of galactic maturity, were, in the eyes of the Watchers, merely volatile children running dangerously close to breaking the expensive furniture of reality. Humanity was not an invader. They were the competent, if blunt, maintenance crew sent to secure the sector before the toddlers destroyed the nursery. "So," Cathal resonated, the harmonics finally smoothing into a tone of pure intellectual acceptance, "your arrival was a function of preemptive liability mitigation. You bypassed the noise of protocol because the stakes involved were the fundamental structure of existence, not territorial disputes. Precisely, Kalen confirmed. We possess the computational capacity to model probabilities across vast scales. The probability of us having to engage in aggressive conflict due to your imminent structural failure was statistically unacceptable. Therefore, intervention was mandated. Vorn felt a strange, unexpected calm wash over him. The fear of conquest was replaced by the awe of true scale, and the humbling reality of being perceived as children, yet children who had, against all odds, been recognized as capable of growth. And what is our role now, Representative Kalen? If the Watchers maintain the structure and humanity provides the optimization metrics, where does the Xylan Imperium fit into this equation? Kalen paused, and for the first time, the stillness seemed to contain something akin to reflection, a moment of internal processing that lasted several long seconds. The Xylan Imperium possesses unique historical data regarding the emergence of sentience within this specific density of matter. Your philosophical framework, while flawed in its operational execution, offers valuable insights into the development of self-imposed limitations. We require that data. We will, in turn, integrate your civilization into the stabilized network. Your cultural identity will be preserved, but your inefficiencies will be systematically resolved. Kalen then offered the final, unifying proposition. We have established a common ground, the stability of the causal membrane. We will share the methodology for maintaining that stability. In exchange, we request access to your core historical simulation archives. We do not seek to erase the past. We seek to understand the pathways that led to this moment of critical intersection. We ask you to join us in looking outward, beyond the boundaries of the Watchers' current purview. The immense, silent presence of the Watchers' signal continued to resonate, a constant reminder of the cosmic stage they occupied. The question was no longer, why don't you run? The question had morphed implicitly into, now that you see the truth, will you work with us? We accept, Vorn declared, his synthesized voice resonating with an authority forged not from inherited power, but from newly aligned purpose. The triarchy of Xylos commits its resources and knowledge to the stabilization matrix. We look outward. Kalen gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, a confirmation of the mathematical solution achieved. The confrontation, born of fear and misunderstanding, had resolved into the highest form of alliance, one based not on shared emotion or politics, but on shared, absolute commitment to fundamental, verifiable reality. As the Xylans began the complex, humbling process of integrating the first human optimization patches into their core infrastructure, patches that smoothed out inefficiencies they hadn't even known existed, a final thought echoed from Kalen into the conclave minds, a closing statement that redefined the scale of their new partnership. The Watchers maintained the immediate neighborhood, but the signal we detected was not merely a maintenance check. The oscillation patterns are accelerating. There is something beyond the null space barrier that the Watchers are containing, a far greater energy sink. Our immediate task is to bring your civilization to a level of efficiency where we can survive that encounter. The true unknown is not behind us, delegates. It is waiting for us just beyond the periphery of the Watchers' sphere of influence. We have just stabilized our home. Now we prepare to meet what comes next. The obsidian dome of the Grand Conclave remained dark, but now, for the first time, the Xylans looked out at the distant stars not with apprehension, but with the terrifying, exhilarating clarity of those who finally understood the true, immense weight of the universe they inhabited, armed with the cold, unyielding logic of their new human allies. The dance of governance was over. The era of necessary survival had begun.